Thank you all for being here. It was a perfect August evening. The high temperatures from the day had cooled enough, and there was a light breeze and low humidity. It was way too nice of an evening to stay home. So I grabbed my then 9-year-old son Danny for an impromptu low expectations evening at Kittyland. Now, low expectations evening meant 3 or 4 rides, slice of pizza, home by 8 o'clock. So we were just coming off the tilt-a-whirl, and I was already a little bit dizzy, but I noticed a lot of commotion going on around me. This rather large Hispanic family had gathered, and they were like hugging Danny and picking him up and crying and laughing, and I was speechless. I was so nervous. And finally, the spokeswoman for the group introduced herself, Aunt Carrie Titi Gotti, and she said that she was Danny's long-lost aunt. She was Danny's aunt. She hadn't seen him in years, and she went on to explain that when Danny's dad passed away, Mom took off with the kids, and the dad's side of the family lost touch with all of them. And she's going on telling me how excited she is to see him, and she's going to come and visit, and he can stay at her house. I was like, stop. And I was so scared. I didn't know a lot about, let me change up. I was not sharing her enthusiasm at all. Danny had just come to live with us less than a year before that. He was our first foster child, and our plan was always to adopt him. The agency picked him out for us because he fell into this category of foster kids called likely eligible for adoption, meaning the courts were moving in that direction. He'd live with us like a year. Parental rights would be terminated, we adopt him, live happily ever after. That was the plan. Titi Gotti was never part of the plan. So I was so nervous, and I didn't know a lot about foster care at the time, but I knew they would always take biological family over this goofy white couple who thought they could raise a Puerto Rican kid from Humboldt Park. And I was really panicked, and I didn't have any words in my head, and God gave me the words that I needed. And I said, I will not interfere with Danny visiting his biological family if that's what's good for him. But he's a foster child, and there's processes to go to. So you call the caseworker, you do what she tells you to do to earn the right to visit. Have a nice evening. And she's hugging me, she's hugging Danny, no problem. I'm dying. So the next day I called the case manager. You can imagine, I was hysterical. And she said, you know, don't worry so much. Biological family usually doesn't follow through. And especially when they see they have to get background checked, fingerprinted, don't worry about it. Okay. Not this family. I swear within a week, they were all fingerprinted, background checked, approved for a visit. And I'm talking about 3% of Humboldt Park. You know, extended Puerto Rican family. And they're telling me they want to come and visit. So Jim and I invited them to our house, which probably seems like a goofy thing to do, but honestly, we were trying to control any part of this scenario that we could. So they came over, and the truth was they were darling, respectful, loving people. It was so clear that Danny loved them, and she loved them. And there, I tell you, when you talk about a visit, there was titis, abuelas, there was cousins. We even had his biological brother and sister there. So it was this big group, and the day was beautiful. I couldn't say anything bad about it, but you know how sad I was. At the end of the visit, Titi Gotti approached me and said, I will never interfere with you wanting to adopt Danny. You are so obviously his parents. I would never get in the way of that. I'd like to respectfully ask that we can be a part of his life, but you are his parents. So anyway, he was 9 at the time. He's 32 now. We are good friends with Titi Gotti and her family, and they have been a blessing. When the kids were a lot to handle, I'd call her up. I was like, take them for the weekend, and she would, and we watched her kids grow up, and they are as much of a family as my own family. So it was really very much a blessing in disguise. So that's one story I wanted to share today, and I think Women's History Month is an ideal time to talk about foster care. So I want to do that for just a minute. And I know I'm going to catch some heat for this, but I think women have an internal compassion and ability to care that it just comes very natural to them. And when you look at foster kids, that's what they need, is the ability. They need nurturing and love and compassion and care. And I know women have the right to be at the conference table and where decisions are, I want to be in the room where things happen. All that's true, but it doesn't take away from women's natural ability to be compassionate and caring and nurturing. So I'm just going to talk about foster care for a minute. It's not something you can dabble in. You can't like, well, I'll try it, and if it doesn't work out, you know, they got to go. It doesn't work that way. So it's not for everybody, and that's fine. But you may not be aware that there's so many other ways to help. For example, there's a tremendous need for what's called CASA workers, court-appointed special advocates who look out for the kids in the foster home. There's a desperate need for education specialists to help foster parents who have good hearts but no experience with complex IEPs manage that process. There's a need for big brothers, big sisters, for mentors, for respite workers. So there's lots of ways to get involved. And I think foster care has sometimes kind of a rough reputation, and it's not necessarily true. Although in my next story, it's very true, I'm going to tell you. So Danny's living in our house for a couple years, and one of the really nice things is we had easy access to his brother and sister. Now they had grown up together. Danny was 7 before he was taken out of his biological home. So he had a whole history with his brother and sister, but when they were taken out, they were placed in different foster homes and really lost contact for 2 or 3 years. And when we adopted Danny, we could easily go see his brother and sister. They were in a foster home where mom was very cooperative, so it was a real nice situation. But as the years went on, it became obvious his sister was struggling, whether it was just being a teenager or depression or trauma. I don't know the answer, but she was getting very angry. She was so mean to her foster mom. Her foster mom actually gave a 14-day notice. She wasn't taking care of herself. So we weren't surprised when we got a call from the agency asking if we had room for another foster child. We assumed it was his sister, but we were surprised. They said, would you take his brother? Okay. His brother was 17, 6'1", 6'2", I don't know. But he had been living in an area of the city, little village, which was rough, and he was getting in trouble in gangs and not coming home. And the agency thought that putting him in a new environment would be helpful. So we said, yeah, we've known him for years. So we said, yes, we would take him. A month later, another call, yeah, sure, we'll take his sister. So we had all 3 in our home. And it sounds like a Hallmark movie. It was a horror story. It was insane. These kids had not lived together for 3 years. So the sibling rivalry, the jealousy, they had grown up very different. His brother and sister went to a rather dysfunctional Chicago public school. We had Danny in a private school. They were in a family with lots and lots of kids. There was no time for anybody. Danny was the only game in town. We did something fun every weekend. So they were so different, and it was just fighting and chaos and screaming constantly. So I was really excited when a friend of mine invited my husband and I to go to the theater and to dinner. We were going to see Jesus Christ Superstar with the original Ted Neely. I told the story once by mistake. I said the original Jesus Christ. He wasn't there. But I was so excited. But I knew I couldn't leave these three kids by themselves. They were 14, 15, and 17. And there's no way. It would be awful. But you can't get a babysitter for a 14, 15, 17-year-old. So I was working at a school, college at the time that had dorms. So I talked to my good friend, and we identified an RA who was mature, who could just relax with the kids and hang out rather than babysit. But she would be there in case something went wrong. I was like, this is an ideal situation. So we agreed on a price, and she came over. Now that particular day, there was snow. When I left for the theater, there was like snow up to my thighs. It was insane, and I don't care. I am going to the theater, and I'm going to dinner. We got through dinner okay, no problems whatsoever, but as we're walking to the theater, my phone is blowing up. And first it's Danny, and Wally snuck a girl into the house and had sex on Danny's bed. And then I get another, like, don't listen, from Wally, like, don't listen to Danny. But then I get another one, like, Wally is now chasing Danny around the house with the used condom because he's mad that Danny told me what he had done. I'm trying to call the sitter. And she's not answering. I'm like, oh my God, they've locked her in the closet. And I just kept picturing the headlines, like, foster mom enjoys the theater while, oh my God. I was like, Jim, we gotta go, we gotta go. So we never even watched the play. We just left, and now there's this much snow. It took us, we were parked like 2 blocks away. It took us 20 minutes to get there. It was so much snow. We drove home. When we walked in the house, it was all quiet and peaceful. Everyone was fine. So I stepped over the used condom, and I went to look for the kids. Danny and Wally are playing video games. Everything's great. The RA, I'll have to admit, was like twitching a little bit. I said, can I give you a ride home? She's like, I'm fine. I was like, it's snowing. She's like, I'm fine. So she ran out the door. The sister's in her room watching a YouTube video. Everything is perfect. So, yeah, it's an adventure. It's very much an adventure, and it's not for the faint of heart. But we really stayed focused on the importance of keeping the siblings together, and we survived. So another win for us. And then there's just, I think there's a perception of foster kids that their problems, none of them are in foster care because of their behavior, none. But they have behaviors that can be a little challenging sometimes. But then sometimes things just work out so well. Again, we got another phone call. It always starts with a phone call. We get another phone call. This was June of 2020. So we're 3 months into the pandemic. Remember, we're all thinking it's got to be just about over. We're like getting out of pandemic mode. So we thought. They said, would you take a 13-year-old African-American male? So, you get a chance to ask some questions. Why is he looking? He was in a foster home already. Why is he leaving that foster home? That's a big question. Well, it was just a bad match. It was like putting Baryshnikov into a house full of Chicago Bears fans. It just wasn't a good match. He was a nice young man. We met him on Zoom. 2 days later, he was in our home. And he was quiet. Can you imagine being put in 13 years old, put in a stranger's house during a pandemic? You can't go to school. You can't go out. We couldn't do any fun things that we would normally do with the kids. We were just stuck there playing Uno like every night. And for a lot of reasons, but I mean, generally this young man is just kind of introverted anyways, a little bit quiet, but he was isolating quite a bit, and I was a little bit worried about him. The only time his face shone is when he was showing us his TikTok videos. Super talented TikTok dancer. He's got, I don't know, tens of thousands of followers. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And he would show us these TikTok videos, and his face would glow. So one day I said, "Do you think you could teach me?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I don't think so." But he's such a nice young man, he didn't say that. He's like, "Yeah, let's try." And he is the most patient teacher you can imagine. What would take him like 2, 3 tries to get the really complicated dances, I was like, "No, wait, let's try this for the 48th time. I do this?" And he's like, "Yes, we do that." And we kept practicing and practicing. We put down the Uno cards, and that's how we spent the pandemic, doing TikTok videos. And it was such a good friendship and bond that we formed. As the pandemic lightened up, we were lucky and we could go out. And every Friday in the summer when I was off, we were on an adventure, whether it was kayaking or Segway tours. And it's just, what a blessing this young man has been to us. Smart, kind, cooperative, just truly a pleasure. So he's actually sitting right here. He wanted to come and hear this talk today. But I just want to end by showing you 2 of our TikTok videos. Keeping in mind, if I ever run for president or something, don't tell anybody you ever saw these. And it's the heart that matters, not the feet and the talent. So give me a second to pull this out. All right. This is as I was getting good, actually. All right. So that's the first one. I don't know how to get out of this. Minimize, thank you. I'll just show you one more that didn't go quite as well, but my God, he's so patient with me. All right. So if I told you at the beginning of this talk that I was going to tell you about an African-American teenage male, you'd have a picture in your head. Yeah? I hope you leave with this picture because it's just truly been a joy. So thank you for listening today. I'm certainly open to questions. This has been really a fun experience. Thank you. Cassandra?
So what in your lifetime made you entertain the thought of being a foster parent? How did that come about?
My parents always had foster kids, so I was kind of used to it. So, yeah. Yes?
How many kids have you fostered?
The total official number is 10, but honestly, some have been 2 nights, and then some have been forever. So, yes?
What's the TikTok handle?
Lucky Foss Mom.
Okay.
All right. Other questions? Jody?
How is your spouse taken to be a foster parent?
He's twitching like the RA. You know, it's a good question because, you know, I honestly grew up with foster kids and I was used to a level of disorder, and he wasn't. He grew up in a perfect Catholic family. We were crazy lucky, and I mean that he was open to it. We had a lot of support. We went to training, because everything you think you know about parenting, you have to throw in the garbage. You know, you can't give these kids consequences. They've been consequenced enough. It's love and talk and working together. So we had a lot of training, a lot of support. We were with really good agencies that we could call for help. But it's been hard on him. But his family and my family, they've all welcomed every one of our kids. So that's not always the case. We are very, very lucky. They're treated like any other of the cousins. So, Hillary?
How'd you get into storytelling?
Oh, good question. I love this question. You know, it's kind of another story, but I took a class like 2 years ago during the pandemic. I took a class to learn storytelling. I always thought I would enjoy it and I might be like a little good at it. We always told stories at home. And so I took this class and I had a chance to practice, and my goal, I always wanted to go to the Moth. And on my Facebook feed one day it popped up, tickets on sale for the Moth. I'm like, Susan, stop it. You have never even been in a show, let alone the Moth. You are not going to the Moth. But then I kept getting this feed. I'm like, oh, no. So the day of the show, it pops up. I'm like, I'm going. I didn't tell anybody. I just went to the Moth. And that during the pandemic, so I had to show my vaccination card, show my ID. And he's like, where's your ticket? I'm like, I hadn't bought a ticket. And the Moth sells out in a minute. He's like, you can't come in. I was like, oh. I said, could I please just look around? You know, just let me get a feel for what the Moth is. I really want to know. He's like, yeah, go on. So I'm walking around, and he comes up and says, someone's not coming. You can have their ticket. I was like, oh, my God. And then at the Moth, you put your name in the hat to get picked. If you get picked, you tell your story, 5 minutes. That's all you get. And I got picked the first night. So I actually told the story about Danny at Kittyland, and I actually won the first night. So it was God like put everything in order for me to get there and to win. And now I'm addicted. I go every month. A lot of Moth shows, one in Berwyn. Every month there's one in Berwyn at Fitzgerald's. That show sells out in like 2 or 3 hours. Get on the Moth Facebook page. That's how you know about the shows. So I just tripped into it. So, yes.
Do you think that's going to be a segue into your stand-up comedy?
No, but...
a way of presenting things that's enlightening and humorous at the same time. I could see it. I could see a natural transition into that.
I love storytelling. So
Well, that's what comedy is.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely. They kind of blend together. We're running a show in Forest Park every month now at Exit Strategy Brewing Company. So there's an awful lot of good storytelling in this area. And Triton's worked so hard at DEI initiatives. I tell you, it comes down to storytelling. Because when you know somebody, it doesn't matter their color, where they work, their age. Now we're connected. I love storytelling because it's so powerful. So, all right. Thank you kindly for coming. It means a lot to me.